Hello everybody! Today I have a big update for Enigma Mode 1.31. Whenever Enigma Mode has a new major patch, you can check out the changelog on Thunderstore. As you can see, we have a bunch of miscellaneous changes to regrowth, the cart saver, the dungeon spicers, charred fortresses, custom locations, a new find spear system, forest goblin, coin pile banking, trophy raids, dragon tier tweaks, the dungeon fire system, and a whole rework of the entire vegetation system from the ground up. This patch is a big one. It also made me realize that I need to make these videos every time I release a major patch to let all of you know that Enigma Mode has been updated. We'll start with changes to the dragon tiers. If you played in the last patch, then you notice that there's a cart when you first start the game, and that cart has some dragon tiers in it. They look like this. The idea is to unlock building from the very beginning. However, putting them in a cart produced a problem where only the first player on the server would get the motor tiers. That's where the Dvergr boss chest comes in. Each boss altar has a special chest, and when you put the right items in the chest, in this case 100 wood, 30 flint, a boar trophy, and a neck trophy, so we put in our stone, our flint, and our trophies, and then boom, the chest gets shocked, and then look at that. We get our 2 dragons tiers and some shields and our standard Eek progression items. This ensures that every single player on an Enigma Mode server has access to dragon tiers early on in the game, allowing them to have a more fully fledged base building experience without forcing them to progress all the way to Motor in the Mountains. But the dragon tier change isn't the biggest thing in this update. The most important thing is the performance overhaul to vegetation. The world around me looks a little bit different than it normally does. Now, you may not have played enough Valheim to notice straight away, and maybe that's for the best. But look at our instance count number. We're currently in a meadows that has 661 instances. That may just be a number to you, but it's a number that's normally between 2,000 and 4,000. And this is before players have even built a single thing. You'll find that the meadow clearings still exist, but the forested areas have been toned down significantly. Usually, the player can still see the horizon somewhere off in the distance, even when they're in a forested area. Don't get me wrong, I still think that single-player Valheim is the prettiest version of Valheim, but I'm starting to be more realistic. If we can reduce the instance counts by 2/3 to 5/6, then we're gonna see pretty drastic performance increases. So I'm not trying to say all of these changes look better, but in my head, even if they're 10% worse, it's worth a double increase in performance in multiplayer. So let's check out the Black Forest. You can see it over there off in the distance. Still very much a Black Forest. Once we get deeper into it, we get that shaded Black Forest feel, as you can see. And that's something that I found out is quite important. The Black Forest vibe comes from the shade provided by a canopy layer and these trees here, combined with the fluffier fir trees that you see here. These are the really important parts of the Black Forest vibe. As long as you have those parts, then you can greatly reduce the occurrences of almost everything else in the Black Forest. Let's run closer to the center of this forest, which would normally hold about 6,000 instances. And here we can see that this area has approximately 1,344 instances, 2 of which are some bears having a good time. This is a huge decrease in instance count. That means that the player could build 4,000 pieces before they have the same amount of instances that's just in the Black Forest from the get-go. And this is the cold, harsh reality of multiplayer in Valheim. If you want to have a good multiplayer experience within vanilla constraints, you need to greatly reduce the instances. I'm not talking about 10 or 20%. I'm talking about getting rid of 80 to 90% of the objects that spawn in the game world. But let's take a look at some of the other biomes as well, because they've all been reworked. We'll start with the mountains, which we've actually made significant changes to, but the funny thing about the mountains is it actually looks like there's more stuff here. Granted, this is a really tiny mountain, so there's not that much stuff in the first place, but when you actually start exploring the mountain, you'll find that there's more trees and rocks that are noticeable, but then when you open up your instance count, there's fewer instances. And we accomplish this by removing most of the small rocks and keeping the big ones that are most noticeable to the player. In Enigma mode, there's essentially 3 kinds of mountains. You have the smaller mountains that are close to the center, which don't have very many unique locations, and are normally just mountain assets. But then, if you go much further away, let's look at this mountain on the extreme edges of the world. In these places, you'll find all sorts of new things, such as charred ruins that have scattered across all of the mountains far away from the center of the world. You'll also find other locations, such as the occasional Morgan Cave. These places are designed to be much different than the mountains that you're used to. But as you can see, they still look like mountains. They're full of rocks and other assets, and there's a bunch of ruins that you can find along the way. And the best part? Look at our instance count. We're sitting at 2,000, which is still incredible considering how many locations are nearby, as opposed to the typical 4,000 to 5,000 found in this situation in vanilla Valheim. But not to worry, because the frost caves you know and love are still here. It's not like there's only charred things in the mountains. And at this point, I should talk a little bit about the location distribution. This is only going to matter to those of you who start a new Enigma seed. Otherwise, these location changes won't apply. But something I learned from hosting a server is that all locations with combat or high instances should be separated from one another. Ultimately, we have to accept that Valheim's multiplayer can only handle one combat area per loaded zone. The loaded zone is about 3 zones away from where I am right now, more or less. And it's all the stuff that my client renders. So if somebody could be fighting an army of goblins over on that mountaintop, it wouldn't matter to me at all. I wouldn't be affected in any way because it's not in my loaded zone. So in this version of Enigma, all of the locations have been overhauled so that they are further away from each other. Now, this does mean that you're not going to find as many dungeons as you do in vanilla. I believe that this will provide a better multiplayer experience because Valheim itself can't handle having multiple dungeons in the same loaded area. That's one of the reasons that I emphasize deeper dungeons that the player can endlessly respawn in a loop. If you don't know about that, in Enigma mode, all you have to do to reset a dungeon is build a coin pile at the entrance of the dungeon and then get out of the way. A few seconds later, the dungeon is going to restart right in front of you. Boom, there we go, dungeon restarted, and now we have a completely new dungeon. Because unlike in vanilla Valheim, Enigma mode makes sure that the seed of the dungeon changes every time you reset it. You also get a nice barrel at the entrance that you can fill up with the loot from the dungeon, and a hidden fire spawns to ensure that you can get a rested buff to make the dungeon more manageable. Almost every dungeon in the game will give you more than 999 coins if you sell the contents to a Dvergr, allowing the player to create a loop of repeating the same dungeon over and over and over again. Just like this, it just keeps respawning, and then the player can keep retrying. I find this method to be more compatible with Valheim because it means that you only need one dungeon to provide unlimited building resources to any number of players. And this accommodates Valheim's networking situation much better than relying on the players finding 5 or 6 dungeons. So now that you understand that the vegetation's been reworked and the locations have been reworked to be further away from each other, allowing players to find one dungeon and reuse it over and over and over again, let's check out some of the other biomes. Here, for example, we have the swamp, which doesn't look scarce at all. It actually looks pretty crowded, to be honest. We're sitting at approximately 1,500 instances, so it's not quite as slim as the other biomes. Speaking of places that people don't like going into, let's check out the Mistlands and the Ashlands. But first, let's go to the plains. Here we are in the plains. As you can see, very familiar assets, but they're scaled up to be bigger, right? We can see there's a vulture nest there. That's kind of unusual. But aside from that, it's the plains that you're used to, sort of. There's more of those spire rocks, and the bushes are more like trees, right? But we still have these birch trees, although they're sized a lot higher. The kicker, though, is look at our instance count, 1,400. And believe it or not, this is because right next to us is a whole entire location. This is a Dvergr Bank, which has a drive-through window, so to speak, on the outside. Or you can go in the main entrance and have a more comfortable, formal experience, clearly illustrating what the purpose is, providing some tips on how to use banks, a Galder table to repair magical equipment, and a black forge for other kinds of equipment from later in the game. This specific location is actually pretty instance heavy, so let's go somewhere else. Here we are in a fantastic rolling plains with some pretty decent views, but then check out our instance count. It's only 300. We were able to eliminate almost everything while still retaining that plains vibe. This should drastically increase performance for those of us with bad connections who have to live with it and play in single player even when we play on a server. But don't worry, I certainly didn't get rid of the goblin camps. In fact, there's a whole script that players have come to really enjoy that adds a bunch of variety to the combat experience in goblin camps. I treat them like a dungeon. They're much more intense than what you're used to, and therefore we don't need to have 5 or 6 of them in the same area. There just needs to be one, and it's resettable, and it usually gives more resources than you need to reset it, resulting in an infinite loop where the player can keep fighting and resetting the goblin camp. So don't worry too much. I know that these changes have made the game feel a little bit more empty, but I think that that emptiness itself may be something very valuable for an online multiplayer Valheim experience. The Mistlands are actually one of the ones I'm most proud of because, to be honest, it doesn't look that different, and I'm pretty sure most players won't even notice that it's been changed so much. But if we look at our instance counts here, we're looking at 1,200 instead of the typical 4,000 to 6,000. Not only that, but you might also notice that there's very little mist in the Mistlands. About 90% of the mist has been removed. In my tests, I found that the mist itself is not an important part of the Mistlands' identity or its visual beauty. Rather, the visual beauty of the Mistlands comes from these rock spires here. These are what make the Mistlands what it is. The combination of these spires plus these yuga shoots is what makes the Mistlands feel like Mistlands. Yes, I know it has mist in the name, but that's fine. That doesn't mean the whole place needs to be covered in mist. I've played around a lot with different kinds of mist removal systems and everything, and ultimately the best thing seems to be to just get rid of almost all the mist in the first place. That way the Mistlands is more accessible and more open. You'll find that there's much less mist in an Enigma world, and also that the Mistlands itself is more open. There are rocks that are really big, but you'll find that there's just more terrain that you can run through because the overall number of rocks has been reduced significantly. I found that this makes the Mistlands a more enjoyable experience because you can still explore it and you only get little moments every now and then where you have to break through some rock. Most of it is running around through clearings and valleys, which were previously covered up by huge amounts of rocks. So if you've ever wanted to have a Mistlands experience that's less laggy and has most of the mist removed already, then here you go. Just check out Enigma Mode. But we didn't stop there. Let's check out the Ashlands, which is another place that's notorious for performance issues. First, on the approach, you're going to notice that there's way fewer of these rock spires, and there's also these Ashlands trees in the water. And I did that purely to allow players a safer way to acquire ashwood in case they want to build on these spires to set up a forward base before they go to the hell that is the Ashlands mainland itself. As you can see here, there was an open shot, just the occasional spikes and trees that we have to avoid. Once you reach the Ashlands itself, you'll find that it's a lot more open. This is, after all, a combat-themed biome, so I figured, you know what? Let's get rid of most of the problems and open it up a bunch so that players can actually fight things more in the Ashlands. One of the reasons people have so many performance issues in the Ashlands is because of these crazy heat visual effects. And instead of working against that, I found that we can actually use those VFX to our favor. These VFX, combined with really tall assets in the background, create a very powerful Ashlands vibe with few instances. As you can see, we open up our instance count and we're sitting at 2,000. Now, this is still pretty high by my standards, but ultimately, I haven't figured out a way to have these really awesome ruins and cathedrals without getting into the 2,000 instance point. These kind of buildings just have a lot of instances. That's how it is. But personally, I really love them. It's really awesome to run away from Ashland's monsters and then find one of these things and then kind of climb up into it and get up into safety. I think that there's a lot of value that these ruins can serve players. As you keep exploring the Ashlands, you'll find that it looks more open and vast. It gives the player more of a sense of being small in a big world. Here, for example, we have the Fader boss location right there, and a bunch of other stuff like flame metal nodes and all of these arches, and we're sitting at approximately 1,900 instances. As you explore the Ashlands, you'll find a couple of other things that aren't normally there, such as these spires. The idea is really to give the player more safety that they can get up into and that they can look over the danger of the Ashlands. I think the Ashlands is a really incredible biome, but the way that it's implemented means that players can't really experience it because it lacks safety. The Ashlands needs more contrast between safety and danger. In vanilla, it's too overbalanced, it's too dangerous, and ultimately people don't experience its true glory and magic. So, by giving players high spaces that are safe to build on, they have a better chance of having a more enjoyable experience. And by reducing the instance counts a lot, and giving the players more open, vast areas to fight in, they'll be able to have some of the combat experiences that Iron Gate intended without as much of the lag problems that are the reality of multiplayer Valheim. As you can see here, we are next to a charred fortress and we only have 3,000 instances. The charred fortress is arguably vanilla Valheim's most instance-heavy location. So to be able to have a fully spawned charred fortress in the Ashlands and only have 3,000 instances is very promising. This is a situation that could easily produce 10 to 12,000 instances in vanilla Valheim. So I'm confident that these changes will allow players to enjoy more of the Mistlands and the Ashlands without having all of those performance issues that people often notice. Whoa! I believe that these changes to the vegetation will produce noticeable performance increases. So I apologize that things will feel a little bit more empty. I think it's going to allow us to have more multiplayer building and combat experiences in general. I believe that by opening up more of the world, we'll experience more of the more enjoyable parts of this wonderful game. Realistically, it seems that Iron Gate simply didn't optimize Valheim to be played on a server. It's optimized to be played by 1 to 3 people in the same place in single player. One of the main optimizations that we can make is drastically reducing the instance counts, as you've seen. I encourage you to explore around in the world and give me feedback on how this feels. If you find anything that you feel like doesn't need to be there or isn't serving its purpose, then let me know. Because to be honest, we probably could get rid of even more stuff to increase performance without removing much of the biome's sense of identity. Now I'll quickly overview the other changes because they're nowhere near as intensive as this vegetation overhaul. The other changes are simple tweaks to existing systems. Here we have a burial chamber, which you'll actually be able to find in meadows far away from the world, as well as swamps. But once you go inside a burial chamber, you have to know that they're very different. You're going to get a chest spawned like this, but then there's going to be a warning message. They will show up behind you. In Enigma Mode, dungeons pretty much infinitely respawn monsters all around you, just like the game Daggerfall, if you've ever gone dungeon crawling in that old gem. This allows one dungeon to be much more challenging and provide a lot more interesting kinds of experiences to the player. When you enter a dungeon, a fireplace will actually spawn above you. This way, you can get a rested buff by just sitting at the entrance of the dungeon. This, combined with the dungeon barrel, allows a more enjoyable dungeoneering experience. We've covered the dragon tiers, so let's move on to the trophy raid system. In Enigma mode, the default raid system is turned off completely. So you don't need to worry about troll raids destroying your base, and you don't need to build moats. You don't need to worry about it. It's okay, you'll never be raided. That being said, we didn't remove raids completely. Instead, players get to choose what raids they get by mounting trophies on item stands. So if we wanted a troll raid, all we'd have to do is mount a troll trophy onto an item stand, and then we may get lucky and get it straight away. That is actually pretty unusual. Normally, you don't get the event on the first tick. Every time it ticks, it rolls a chance for the event. And so what I did is I changed it so there's more communication with the player. As you can see, the troll trophy is putting out that little orange question mark. Every time it does that, it's rolling a chance to trigger the ground is shaking raid. We make the building experience much more consensual without removing all of the depth, because players can still spawn raids on their base whenever they want, provided they use the trophies to do so. Moving on to the Dvergr Banking system. We made some adjustments. You can deposit a coin pile by running over it, as you see like that. That's going to deposit it in your Dvergr Bank account. Let's say you don't want a coin pile to be deposited. That's fine. All you have to do is say no bank near the coin pile, and then it's aesthetic. The coin pile will not be deposited by a player walking over it. Once you've deposited coin piles, you have two ways to withdraw them. You can use the command say coins, and that's going to withdraw a coin pile, but it comes at a cost. Because you magically withdrew it, it cost you 2 coin piles. So if I try and do it again, I can't do it because I only had 2 coin piles in the bank and I just used them up. If you don't want to pay that 2 coin pile cost for every 1 coin pile withdrawn, then you can just find an actual bank location. If you go to an actual bank and type say coins, then you're going to be able to withdraw it for only 1 coin pile. The next system is a new custom system involving spears. Have you ever gotten tired of losing your spear? You throw it off in the middle of combat and then get confused as to where it landed? Now all you have to do is type say spear, and you're going to get a little arrow on the ground for a moment that points at the nearest spear. This will allow you to much more easily locate that spear that you lost off in the distance. As we can see, each arrow points directly at the item drop, and then if we go all the way right next to it, let's go to the other side, and then boom, right there, very easy to find our spear. We got it back. The other changes are mostly all bug fixes and feedback revisions, so I won't go over them in too much detail. But if you want to, you can just go to Thunderstore Enigma Mode mod pack, and then look at the changelog there, and you'll get a list of all of the recent changes. I view the changelog as something that helps educate players and teach them about systems that they didn't know about. So I actually encourage you to read it. I don't think you're going to ruin your Enigma Mode experience. If anything, it'll probably get you excited for something specific that you'd like to try out or you feel interested in. And remember, Enigma Mode is a completely openly developed project. You can get involved yourself by playing on the Enigma Mode server that I host and giving me feedback based on your own experiences. You could also just play on single player and comment in the Discord group in Valheim World Editing or in the poolside Discord with your feedback. To play Enigma Mode, all you need to do is use single player Valheim, set up R2 Modman, and then look for Enigma Mode. I also recommend that you use the Enigma Mode Quality of Life mod pack. Alternatively, if you want to support my work, then consider supporting me on Patreon. Even if you do it just once, it really makes a big difference, and any kind of financial support really helps me out, because I'm in a position now where I'm not earning as much as I need, and I'm going a bit into debt to continue focusing on Valheim the way that I do. Ultimately, this isn't sustainable, and unless my YouTube channel grows or I start earning more money from something else, I'm going to have to stop at some point. So I really could use the support. I really do appreciate it. If you want me to continue working on Valheim and doing it in this open source manner where I encourage people to copy and use the projects that I work on, I don't require any kind of attribution or any kind of credit. I encourage you to do what you want, make your own worlds, learn from these scripts, adjust them, improve them. That's the whole point of Enigma. It's basically a trick to get people into scripting and learn about the magic that is Expand World Prefabs. Alternatively to supporting me on Patreon, you could just like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really does help me out. Or you could just find any video on YouTube about Valheim and like that. Really, the scene needs more demand and more interest from you, the viewers. So ultimately, it's up to you whether Valheim lives or dies. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.